Hi, this is Misha, and this is something we've been asked about on and off for a couple of years now because our channel's getting known for having different Kalashnikov variants, AKs and SKSs and whatnot. And it's time to visit the Romanian Psl. Now, this is often called a sniper rifle, but of course, as many of you know, it's more of a designated marksman, a DMR rifle. This is often also called a Dragunov, and it isn't, even though this one's actually marked Dragunov. We'll get into that in a bit. Although it fills the exact same role on the battlefield as the Dragunov, and in some ways might actually be better. Like the Dragunov, it fires 7.62 54 rimmed, the Russian cartridge. And both guns prefer bullet weights between about 149 and 151. You definitely don't want to shoot heavy ball 180 up in these. It's just not what they're sprung for. Unlike the Dragunov, which uses its own operating system, short stroke gas piston, milled receiver, etc., the PSL is a scaled up Kalashnikov. Or to be more exact, a scaled up RPK, which is the light machine gun version of the Kalashnikov. So it uses the AK's operating system, long stroke piston, rotating bolt, stamped receiver, and the trigger group is very, very similar. It's just scaled up. It is quite a long, spindly gun here. We have about a 24.5-inch barrel, so over 2 foot long. It's a light profile. Overall, this weapon is about 45 inches, and it weighs about 9.5 pounds with its issued scope unloaded. It feeds from detachable, 10-round, double stack, double feed box mags, reciprocating charging handle, AK style safety, rock and lock to insert your mag again. Now, one difference, this does feature a bolt hold open. It is automatic. It does not rely on the follower like, say, a Yugo mag, but there is no manual release. You just have to pull back and let your bolt go. Still, though, it does have a true bolt hold open device. Mag release, as you saw, is very AK style. Since this is based on the RPK, we're using a 1.5mm stamped receiver as opposed to 1.0. We have a bulged front trunnion. We also have metal sheets in the back riveted in for additional recoil support when the bolt comes back. Our iron sights are the same as a Kalashnikov, rated out to 1,000 meters. Adjustable front post, muzzle brake, we'll talk about in a minute. We have a long gas system with a ventilated lower handguard and vents on the upper. No cleaning rod is meant to go under the barrel. And we use a standard AK type sling. Early guns, pretty much their military ones, were leather. Later they would sometimes go to the green nylon you're accustomed to seeing, especially in the 90s. So let's talk a little bit about the history before we get into features, and I did bring the full kit out. I've got the pouch here with gear. I've got the bayonet for it. This rifle's history dates back to the mid-60s when Romania, Ceausescu, his government, had a falling out, to some extent, not full, but a bit, with the Soviet Union over policies in Eastern Europe, including in the Czechoslovakia. So in '68, after Khrushchev was long out and Brezhnev was much in power, and there was kind of a status quo time in Soviet Russia, because Romania wasn't following the status quo, they slowed the technology transfer. Now, Romania had never manufactured the original milled Kalashnikov, the AK Type 3, the AK-47, but they did began to manufacture the AKM at the Cugir arsenal in 1963, and would continue to do so really until this very day. They would begin to manufacture the RPK at the same arsenal in 1964, adopting each as the PM63 for the rifle and the PM64 for the light machine gun. They would adopt an underfolding version of the AKMS as the PM65 in 1965. So for a while they were, building standard Russian guns, including the Tokarev pistol, so on and so forth. But as technology was slowed down, they would start to make more domestic designs, and this is where the PA-86, the Ames 74, comes from. It was in 5.45, but it wasn't really an AK-74. This is because by the time the AK-74 was coming out, Russian-Romanian relations weren't as cozy, and much like with the PSL. PSL basically just stands for Scoped Semi-Automatic Rifle. These were always in semi-auto. They were never meant to have full auto. Although since they were based on the RPK and the AKM, they did have the out-of-battery safety, which will cause problems for importation, we'll talk about later. Romania was going to begin producing, at least in theory, the SVD, the Dragunov, but they never obtained the tooling and the technology, so they worked on their own version here, starting with the PM64, the RPK as a base. They scaled it up to fire 7.62 by 54 rimmed. Work would begin around 68, 70. They would receive some feedback and assistance and kind of a back and forth with some of the engineers at the Zastava, the Crana Zastava factory in Yugoslavia. This is because they too were designing their own version. This would result in the M76 milled and 8mm Mauser, and also the M77 stamped, done in 7.62 NATO, as well as 8mm Mauser. So they would do their own thing, and both of those guns would be based on the Kalashnikov as well. So both companies were working on a very, very similar concept. A DMR rifle in the full power cartridge based on a Kalashnikov. So there was also some back and forth. The optics would be designed, and we'll talk more about them, in Romania, based on the Soviet pattern. But there would also be some assistance from Zeiss, of all things. So, a lot went into these. And they were first adopted as the model 1974 in 1974. Although production wasn't quite underway yet, the final design specs were being hammered out. These would seem to go into production around 1975. So around the same time as their Serbian cousin. And they are still technically in production today. The Romanian military would purchase quite a few, issuing them about one per squad on the Soviet pattern, to have a DMR, a marksman, to extend the range of the squad. They weren't always used as a sniper rifle, hitting high profile targets, more just suppression fire and just targets of opportunity. So their role in the battlefield was a little different, and of course soldiers weren't as heavily trained as a true sniper. No need for that because there were so many issued, and this gun wasn't capable of supreme accuracy. It was rated out to about 800 meters, although it could do about 1,000, pushing it with some experience and good ammo. And it was never sub-MOA or even MOA. It was always meant to, human-sized targets, so 2 to 3 MOA wasn't at all uncommon for these. And that's what they were manufactured. Now the trade-off, they weren't that expensive to build, especially compared to other sniper rifles. They were semi-auto. They were easy to train troops on because of their commonality with the Kalashnikov. They weren't especially heavy. 9.5 pounds worth of sniper rifle is actually quite good. And most importantly, they were very durable and reliable. These are very robust weapons. This is actually why they became popular outside of Romania. Cugir would end up manufacturing thousands upon thousands for customers in Africa, the Middle East, and elsewhere, because they were very good in the sand and dirt, mud and grime and jungles. They were just very durable guns. And like I said, they're still in service today. So let's look at some of the kit. This is the standard issue pouch, at least one pattern. It's quite full here. We have 2 mags on the top here, and we have 2 more down here in their own little pockets. We have the issued scope here. If I can get her out. Some other gear. Got mushed my eye cup a little bit. Oh well. Let it breathe. There are a few different styles of scope cover. This is the kind of the nylon-y style. This cover can go over the rifle too with the scope. This is the LPS-4. This is the Type 2, the most common style. It's based on the original Russian PSO-1 4x24 scope. Now the PSO was battery powered. The early LPSs were battery powered as well, but quickly they would go to the Type 2, which was tritium illuminated for the reticle, which made it a little simpler and easier to manufacture. It also meant, though, that the tritium would have to be replaced every 10 years, give or take. But then again, batteries also have to be replaced. As you see, we have a rubber eye cup. We have this extendable sunshade. We have a little cover here. We have turrets without little caps, so you can easily adjust. This fits on the standard side rail. Very AKM style, if I get my sling out of the way. It is a very simple, dependable scope. Like I said, there was some input from Zeiss. Actually, the optics company that manufactured these in Romania had been in business since before World War II. It was located in Bucharest. It was a well-respected company. As you see, this slides on to the side here quite easily. This is adjustable, so you can set the tolerance, the tightness, and it will return to 0, at least battlefield 0. It's one of the benefits of this not being a supremely precision-made rifle, but it will get to where it needs to be. Now we're set up here with our optic. This is still a 4-power, 4x24. These were matched to the rifles. Also in our bag, we have a few other goodies. There are some different pouches. Here's one of the styles, a little 2-pocket. It's got a little cleaning jag and a lens for the scope. This was to reduce glare in high light situations, although it did decrease visibility a bit. There's also a lens cloth in here. Have several compartments actually inside. Here's another style of pouch that can be issued with these. I just have it, so I'll put it in there. There's actually several little compartments in here. There's a sectional cleaning rod, 3 pieces. As you saw, there was nothing under the barrel, so it goes in a pocket in the pouch. On the top of the lid, it stores a standard cleaning kit, jags and brushes. That's because the buttstock does not have a spot for it. Instead, we have this corrugated butt plate. It's actually spring-loaded to help take a little of the recoil. Of course, the stock is skeletonized, Dragunov style. There's room for plenty of other tools. There's an oil bottle in here. We've got, let's see, got a broken shell extractor. Pretty typical. It's just for the 76254R versus 39. We have a gas port pick. And we have a few little pockets. I'm actually not even sure what they're for in here. Like I said, they issued with quite a bit of gear because of what the purpose of this gun was. But as you see, it came with some pretty neat stuff, all in all. Neat belt pouch there. Also issued with the PSL, much like the Dragunov, was a bayonet. It's kind of funny to think of a sniper rifle with a bayonet, but when you consider this was a DMR issued on the squad level, I guess they figured it could not hurt. It has a standard lug under the barrel here. It just takes the normal Romanian bayonet. Now, some were manufactured with a fixed muzzle brake. I brought one out. Actually, it's a piece of a barrel to show you. See, it's held on with this pin here. I'm sure this was done for accuracy. But some, such as this one, had standard 14x1 left-hand threads. And I'm sure this was done so they could attach blank fire devices or maybe a flash hider if you're using night vision, something to that extent. I was told that these were mostly done for export contract, not for the Romanian military. I can't verify that though. That's what I was told by one of the guys at Century eons ago. I will say though, these flash riders are pretty tightly, or I should say muzzle brakes, excuse me, tightly fitted with basically no play, even to the point they were serialized to the gun. So I think that's why they're serialized, to make sure they time up without throwing off accuracy to any noticeable degree. Actually, these have a number of serialized parts. The gas tube, rear sight, the safety, dust cover, of course, bolt carrier, of course. The scopes were originally serialized. Even early PSLs could have a serialized trigger group, hammer, trigger, that kind of thing. Later, they would drop some of those serialized parts. So that's a little run through of the rifle. Jay will be bringing you an accuracy report, of course. That is not my forte.
So back when I had my PSL, I was typically getting about 4-inch groups, maybe with surplus ammunition, surplus Russian ammunition at about 150 yards. And that's been basically what I've seen online and other tests is, you know, with standard commercial ammunition, maybe 2 to 3 inch groups at 100 yards, you know, with match grade ammunition, you'll tighten your groups up a little bit, but the barrel's very thin and very long, so you do get some barrel whip and everything. And at the end of the day, it's an AK, but just with a longer barrel and chambered for 54R. So something to keep in mind if you're looking at a PSL is you're not really getting an extremely accurate, extreme high accuracy sniper rifle or anything like that. It is a chambered up AK.
But we'll talk now about the PSL in the USA. Romanian guns did not start to come in, Romanian AK-based guns did not start to come into the US until 1997. There's really no such thing as a pre-ban Romanian gun. Now, obviously the first really to hit in numbers that matter were the 7.6239 Kalashnikovs based on the PM63. The earliest ones were in the Romac family. Romac 1. There was also the 1-1. There's even one called the Romac 99-1, so on and so forth. The 2s were actually in the 5.45, and these are the first 5.45 guns to really come into the U.S., period. So the Romac 2, the Cur 2, the WUM 2, so on and so forth. Now the Romac 3 was this guy here. Not this specific one, but one like it. And in the beginning, Romanian guns, unlike today, which are imported by Century almost exclusively, were imported by a number of companies. There were 3 major importers of the PSL type in the late 90s. You had Interordnance, IO, who brought these over, designating them as the SSG 97. It's a made-up name, as most will be. It was kind of based on the whole German thing that Interordnance was going for at the time. You had Century Arms that began with the Romac 3, Roman numeral 3. Later they would change the name to PSL and PSL 54C. And you had the Tennessee guns, like this here. They were imported as the FPK Dragunov. And there was also just a standard FPK. We'll get into that in just a sec. But those are the earliest imports. And these were basically rebuilt from military guns. Now I say rebuilt because you would think, being a semi-auto only, there wouldn't be a lot of import problems because we have a thumbhole stock. The early ones used the fixed flash hider, and originally they would shave or otherwise demill the bayonet lug. And only fed from 10-round magazines. No problems, except for that auto sear, the out-of-battery safety we talked about. The ATF has considered the out-of-battery safety to be the machine gun, specifically the hole it rides on. So even though the PSL was a semi-auto only, always in Romanian, they still had to rebuild these in Romania on new receivers lacking the pinhole. And if you want to know how serious the ATF was about this, once Century did accidentally import some with the third pinhole, still again semi-auto only, the ATF promptly made them do a recall and cut up the receivers. So they took it pretty serious. This actually uses the milled style, RPK style, recoil spring guide you see here too. So it uses the lighter rib dust cover though. Longer, of course. So these had to be rebuilt, and you had to take the bayonet lug off to appease the ATF. Now the SSG 97s, the IO guns, were what they were. The Century, most of you are familiar with. Some could be built from new parts, but most were reassembled military guns on new receivers. It would come in several different styles. But I want to talk about the Tennessee guns because this is what I have here. There are 2 really basic types to talk about. The ones marked FPK Dragunov on the side seem to be true blue imports. There's a few reasons why. First off, the markings are on the sight base here, not on the receiver itself. There's really nothing there on the receiver. Second, the font is Cugir style font here. Serials match. These came in with the bayonet lug lobbed off. Also Most had the muzzle device, either the fixed style, or they had the thread style, but it had a small tack weld on the bottom. And these seem, like I said, to be true imports rebuilt over there at Cugir for our market. However, there's also a version simply called the FPK, which has the markings in a different location, although the receiver still says made in Romania on the receiver. And these seem to have been assembled in the USA using pretty much all Romanian parts, receiver, barrel, all that. This was early days, long before the barrel ban and long before any other thing else, the early 2000s. So there's this version, the FPK, that was assembled here from Romanian parts. And then there was a final version that TGI sold, built on Nodak spud receivers, marked on the right side, that were original Romanian part sets, but on US receivers. And you can usually tell these because they do not have the bolt hold open feature in the receiver, because it's integral to the receiver. Those guns that the ATF made Century Arms cut up and rebuild, they rebuilt those on Nodak as well, and they would lack the bolt hold open. Those were the real cheap PSLs you saw from Century for $500, and they typically just came with one mag, maybe a scope. Otherwise, they would usually sell these with a more or less complete kit, at least early on. You would get everything I've shown here except for the bayonet. Inordinates would drop out of the game, I don't know exactly when, but pretty early on, leaving TGI and Century. The TGI guns got the FPK name because it was kind of an early prototype name, and Cugir let the importers name them whatever they wanted. And I will say the TGI guns vary wildly in quality. This one is a good one. It has nice shellac on the furniture. Most of the parts have the original kind of matte blue finish, salt blue. It has a nice bore, and it's a very good shooter. On the other hand, a friend bought one from Tennessee Gun, new years ago, and it came in with driftwood, all kinds of canted parts, and very, very mismatched finish. So it was really a mixed bag. Century seems to have had better quality control, or Cugir was sending mostly them the better guns. Let's talk about the Bayonet Lug for a minute. This one has been restored. Of course, I bought this gun secondhand. There's a few different ways. Some guns were just sent over that never had bayonet lugs on the barrel. These are probably made for the US market, at least the barrels, because there wasn't the step down for the lug. Others would have the complete band, but the whole bottom would just be machined off. And finally, some would have even the nub down here, but the wings would be zipped off. So there's a few different styles you'll see there. For the muzzle devices, like I said, many had the fixed pattern. Now, I saw a good number come over from Century, especially, that were threaded and were not tack weld. It seems like they only caught on to the fact that they're starting to send these over with the threaded device, removable device, as opposed to the fixed device, only after several months of bringing them over. So later ones, they would just blob a very ugly weld. It was actually a very soft steel because it was put on over the finish. I took it off on this one because it was just bleh. So those are the few things they did, and the reason they did that was just to make this featureless for import so it would comply with the 89 Bush ban on so-called assault rifles. Even though it was a 10-round gun, thumbhole stock, if it had a bayonet lug and a removable muzzle device with threads underneath, it had too many evil features. Now, once in the USA, it's perfectly fine to have those back. It's an import thing. So yeah, the Romanian PSL, or in this case, FPK Dragunov. I didn't name it Dragunov. That was something TGI did for marketing purposes, but it does at least usually tell you that this is a true import versus the standard just marked FPK. All the serials on this gun do match, which is nice. Like I said, I picked it off a friend recently. He had the complete kit. He even had the Russian POSP 8-power scope for it. but I like the 4-power. It's slimmer and it's the correct one for this gun. These are still in service in the Romanian military today, as well as many other militaries in the Middle East and elsewhere. So they're good, dependable guns. They are not Dragunovs, they are not sniper rifles, but what they were designed to do, they do very, very well. And they're very good shooters. Again, just remember to please shoot around 150 grain or less ammunition out of these, because heavy ball will batter the crap out of it. That's when they put the reinforcements in the back to begin with, because 7.62 54R out of a stamped receiver Kalashnikov is pretty punchy, but these are very smooth shooters, surprisingly. The butt plate helps a smidgen, but the fact that the gun is so long and about 10 pounds loaded up helps as well. And the muzzle brake is surprisingly effective. But like I said, a lot of you had asked about this, so we thought it was time we would bring it to you. If you enjoy Romanian guns, we have a playlist with plenty of others from Cugir, so please check that out. If you have any questions or want to talk about your own PSL or FPK in the comments, we'd love to do that as well. If you liked the video, please click like. And if you'd like to help support us get to the range a little more often, please check out the link to our Patreon page. Guns like this, we like to shoot modern commercial ammo, non-corrosive out of, even though the bore is chrome lined. These are getting a little collectible. Once upon a time, you could buy these for about $600–700 with the scope. For a long time, in fact, for over 10 years. But as they started to dry up, of course, they became very popular. And today, now that the Vepr is gone, this is, one of those options. Century hasn't really imported these since about 2013, though. But the good news is, for over 15 years, multiple importers did bring these in. So if you would like a PSL, they're still out there. I would say check them out before buying, though, because quality was kind of all over the place depending on the original rifle they were built from, and also just the importer and the day of the week they were having. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. This is Misha. And we'll catch you next time.